Okay, Gigi, you've been doing photography and content creation for like pretty much your whole life. How did this start? Were you just like, did you love cameras? Did you love storytelling? Like where did this come from?
So for those that don't know anything about me, when I was about 10 years old, I got diagnosed with a chronic illness and I had to give up competitive swimming. And at one point in my life, I think that was when Michael Phelps was in his prime. And I was like, I want to be the female version of that. Like, I want to go all the way. And my doctors were like, if you don't stop swimming, you're going to ruin your shoulders. You're going to need surgery. And we don't want you to do that. So you have to quit all contact sports. You have to quit everything and just move on with your life, figure something else out and like manage your chronic health issues on the side. So I'm like, okay, what can I do? And I was always good at art, always loved art class, was always creative, always like building things, tinkering with things. And I was in middle school at the time. So I just kind of found this fascination with a bunch of different mediums and picked up my dad's D70. And for anyone who uses Nikon, you know that is a very old camera. I think it's like a 16 megapixel camera, which like now is like a joke using that.
So it sounds like your parents, or at least your dad, was creative and like you picked up a bit from him.
Yeah, a little bit. Definitely. Like he's, always has kind of like his own art stuff on the side. But I think having the exposure and the ability to even like use a camera like a Nikon, a DSLR when I'm like a teenager was really awesome. And also being born and raised in New York City, that meant going through the very vicious cycle of public school and placement in specialized public high schools. So I ended up applying to LaGuardia and I had to curate and create a portfolio and train for the interview process to apply to LaGuardia, which is just, it was insane. But it led me to where I am today. So I'm insanely grateful for it. And I love cameras and I have since upgraded. My latest camera that I'm loving is a Nikon Z30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, let's go back a little bit. That was a huge download there. Very helpful. But if you have a camera, you're starting to explore photography at the time. And it sounded like not being able to compete led you to explore that a bit more than maybe you would have. How, like, when it came to applying to LaGuardia, do you think, like, did you want to go there because of photography, or did you view photography and a great portfolio as a way to stand out to get in? Like, what was the thought process there?
Yeah, I think I had dreams, at least when I started doing photography, I became really enamored with like landscape and night photography and obsessed, like seriously obsessed with Ansel Adams and Sebastião Salgado, just like figuring out how they shot this on film was just like so fun. And then I actually went to this really random remote summer camp in the state of Washington somewhere. And they had this incredible photographer. His name's Garrett Surrey, for anyone that doesn't know. And I don't really ever mention it, but he is an incredible landscape and night photographer, but he also had a background in like celebrity and Hollywood. And I think he worked on, endless covers for magazines. And so it was really in that moment where I got to like get exposed to somebody who showed me what was possible with photography that really, I think, was like the jumping off point. And in terms of competition, I know you touched on that. I was obsessed with submitting my work to competitions. I won.
So you still wanted to win?
Always. Yeah. And it wasn't about winning though. It was just about like proving my level of excellence and like always trying to up level on myself. Like I was never competing against you or against anybody else that I knew. Most people that were in these competitions and entering were people that I didn't know. I was just entering them kind of like to prove to myself that like, oh yeah, like this could work. So, I mean, I could send you my CV afterwards if you really want it. You can like pop things up. But I won some pretty big competitions. I was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art through Scholastic and PS Art like multiple times, which was kind of insane as like a 16, 17, 18-year-old at the time, like to apply to colleges and be like...
Were you shooting on film?
Film and DSLR. Okay. Yeah. And some of it was night photography. Some was portraiture.
So I was just talking to a friend about the differences between like film and like digital. And so I've been a photographer for like over 10 years now. And it wasn't until a year ago I got my first film camera, which is crazy.
Wait,
like,
what'd you get? The
I got
A7?
No, I got a Minolta XG7. I found it at like Salvation Army. It was broken. I fixed it. It's like my baby now.
Amazing.
But it's changed how I look at photography.
100%.
And I think I was telling my friend, you should get a film camera. Like you've started to learn photography and content creation on your iPhone, which is a great way to start.
Yeah.
But I think, and I guess I'm posing this as a question, how is like practicing film photography like impacted your future as a photographer and then like now a creator? Like what, like was it the foundation?
I think so. And I also love that you're forcing me to talk about this because literally nobody—
We're here to bring it out.
Nobody knows that photography was like my past life except for my close family and friends. And sometimes
we did our research.
Yeah. Sometimes they ask and they're like, wait, like, why don't you ever do photography? And I'm like, because I found a more lucrative business, which is content creation. Anyway, so when I got exposed to film photography, it was definitely in high school, like in LaGuardia. We had our whole dark room. And I think I was right, like, okay, we're in high school. This is the time where I think Photoshop was still like you had to buy like an enterprise level. Like you couldn't Creative Cloud subscription back in like 2014. Maybe I'm wrong. You might have to quote me on that. But it was like the school subscription. And I think I had like some bootleg version that I downloaded, which I feel like a lot of kids did back then. Yeah. And so I became obsessed with like Flern, you know, that YouTube channel. Or you know, oh my God.
I know Flern. No.
You're going to love this guy.
Okay. You need to check out Flern.
PHLEARN, like Photo Learn, like Flern.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know them. And so I became obsessed with learning like frequency separation and like pro retouching at the age of like, you know, 14.
So you're obsessed.
I was obsessed.
Yeah.
And I was doing portraits. Like one of my photo book projects at school was actually of magazine covers in high school. And then I ended up wanting to go to USC to be in proximity to shoot those kinds of things. But simultaneously, as I was doing that digital work, they were like, okay, you guys need to do film. And doing film kind of pulled that curtain back. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, we don't need to be retouching. We can literally manipulate things with light and shadows and do that and get it as close to how we want it to look on film. And then we can go into the dark room and do that manual retouching, which was, I think, really eye-opening and really inspiring. And that's also something that helped me kind of make the shift from like, yes, I'm going to Photoshop and retouch something to I actually am very firm on not altering or changing anything in my images other than like a white balance or like color balance at this point. Yeah,
I'm the same way. When I started I did headshots and then portraits. We actually met at an event where I was doing portraits like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about lighting.
Yeah.
Because until then, I had done photography for like maybe 6-7 years, just as a hobby.
Right.
And I was never controlling light, never really using flash.
Interesting.
And just capturing whatever was ambient. And then I started exploring creating my own light and then also film photography. And now even the way I capture in an ambient setting is very different because I just have a much deeper understanding of light. So okay, you know cameras, you know light, you know like.
I also interned with Peter Hurley.
I remember I was going to ask you about that. Because he's known for his like
Shebang.
very unique triangle like headshot light setup, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was it like?
Westcotts.
What was it like working on that?
So at the time, also I don't always talk about this, but I graduated from LaGuardia. I went to FIT for a year and then I transferred to USC. Okay. So at my year at FIT, I had this one public speaking or like professional communications teacher. I can't remember which one it was. And he was like, okay, by the end of the semester, you need to send like 200 emails or something because, you know, the return rate is going to be way less than that. So reach out to as many people as possible. Just ask for an informational interview. And he didn't really like guide us. I mean, he did guide us and tell us like, here's the things you should do. Here's the things you shouldn't do. But something that I did that a lot of other people didn't, which led to me interning for Peter, was doing the background research to know Peter's story before I went into the interview so that I could talk to him in a way that was like not wasting his time. Like he doesn't want to go do an interview with a college student who doesn't already know his story and his passion and, you know, what he did in his past life before he fell into photography. And I think that's something I'd even translate into what I do today, which is always researching either the person you're talking to, their professional communications and or roles to help you use that as leverage, like when you're negotiating. And a lot of people just really don't think about that. So I did this interview and he was like, by the way, do you need an internship? And I was like, yeah. And that was it.
So I did something similar before I quit my job to build Click. I was looking for jobs at other startups.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's such a competitive space, and cover letters were optional for a lot of these roles. But what I would do is record a video, like a selfie video before like talking head videos were even a thing,
right?
Explaining specifically why I was interested in the role and why, based on my experience, I would be a fit for it. And I would paste that YouTube URL in the cover photo.
So smart.
Section of the application. I landed a lot of interviews I was completely unqualified for, and then ended up not going down that path and doing my own thing. But it taught me like there's really easy ways to stand out.
Very much
maybe
so.
Not easy, but simple. Like do your research and show them.
But people are lazy.
Yeah. Let's dive into that, because I think most people won't admit that they're lazy. What in the world of content creation now, like you're in a like, we're jumping ahead to content creation. Photography was like the building block. Yeah. Right. It's like kind of the core foundation of this pyramid that you build. When it comes to content creation and building a career out of it, what are some of the things that people can do to not be lazy? Because I think people like to make excuses. Oh, this is hard. Like I'm figuring it out. Like I'm just getting started. Like it's easy to make excuses. How do these people not be lazy? What can they do to kind of flip that and take action? It
depends how bad you want it.
Yeah.
It really, everything that anybody has done, like there is a roadmap. People write memoirs for a reason. Like pick up your top 3 favorite, celebrities' memoir, if that's who you want to emulate.
Right.
Read their memoirs or read their business success story or failure and how they use that to build their next big thing that became their success. And then figure out how to apply it to yourself. Like nobody's going to hand you a blueprint on what your success should be, like on a silver platter. You have to create that blueprint. But if you're not even willing to make a blueprint, you're not setting yourself up to build a long-term business, number one. And number two, I don't think you're deserving of it at that point.
Yeah. So you're saying that like there's a lot of roadmaps out there. Like there's different ways to achieve some form of success. And it sounds like you need to figure out, what does success look like to me? Oh, it's like this creator, celebrity, or influencer. I look up to them. I want to get to where they are. And okay, well, let me see how they did that.
Right. But and it's so much more nuanced than let me see how they did that. It's who are their brand partners? Who is their management? What kind of side ventures have they built out? What kind of content do they do? Do they only do podcast content first and they do content creation second? Is it the reverse? Is it that they are building a startup on the side? Is it that they wrote a book? What is it about what somebody else has that allures you to that, and then figuring out what about their strategy or their approach got them there. And for some people, it really is the connections that they have. For other people, it's a random bout of virality that allowed them to build something and they capitalized off it in a really smart way. For other people, it's just about putting the reps in and becoming like a career creator and like doing it for the long haul and figuring out like what are the steps that I need to do in order to grow and scale. Like, did I ever think I would end up writing books as a content creator? I don't think that's how I started, but that is the next step in my journey, because I know, for example, someone like a Mel Robbins or Gabby Bernstein, who are just absolutely incredible creators and podcasters and speakers and authors. Like they are so multifaceted and multi-hyphenate, and I really look up to them. But they started at one point writing their first book.
Yeah.
They started at one point doing public speaking for free. They started at one point putting out videos and podcast episodes that maybe a couple hundred people listen to. And so it's all about like figuring out what other people have done and how you want to get there. And right now I'm just focused on writing and being a public speaker.
And I think you're like at a point where people want to get to. And I think I love the advice of like, don't just like come up with a plan, but like really dig into the details of the plan and like look at, who these people worked with. Can I get in touch with them? Like, I love all that, but like that can be overwhelming. How do you balance having a plan, like thinking long-term, and also just like starting? Because I think if you overanalyze it too much and you're like, well, I want to make this format of content and like this style, and like you end up not doing it. So how did you start, and what advice, like how do you find balance between just taking action and like taking the right actions?
So I've been creating content online since 2016, probably even before that. I was posting my art before that, but I've been posting for years. If you look on my Instagram, you'll see I think I have multi-thousands of posts. Like, there's a reason for that. And the reason is because I've been doing it for almost 10 years. And a lot of people like to look at the success of where a certain creator is and not discredit, but they don't acknowledge the growth and like the long term of it, right? Like in 2020.
It does not happen overnight.
It doesn't. And like for some creators, like, yes, of course, like the Alex Earls of the world, like they're anomalies and they do get to grow really quickly. Or like a lot of people during 2020, they grew really quickly and now they're starting to see a decline in views, a decline in engagement. And like maybe they didn't capitalize off of their virality at the right moment. Therefore, they're needing to go back to a corporate job, or they're needing to, get some kind of other revenue stream of some sort. So I think there's a certain amount of planning that you have to do, and being like, okay, here's a couple creators that I would love to be in competition with, right? Like what's the competitive analysis for me and my niche and where I want to go, as well as like, what's the long-term goal, right? Like you don't start being like, I just want to become a viral content creator unless you're a Gen Z teenager.
That's a result. Like what's
the long-term?
Yeah. What's your goal? And like, what's your message?
What it should be is that you build your platform to a point to where you can market and sell to a specific audience, and you're building a product and or a business for that need of that audience. So it's never, to me, about how can I best like go viral. It's about how can I best find the audience that I want to sell to once I build, write, publish, do whatever.
But how do you feel about, because I've seen so many people talk about the paradigm of like providing value and like extracting value from an audience. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about, like, you're very tactically thinking about how am I going to sell and monetize to this audience? Like, does that conflict with your kind of creative thoughts and like creative direction, and like it's there's a balance, right?
For sure. And to finish that point on the last one, it's coming up with a competitive analysis and then testing and trying and falling on your face and getting 5 views, 500 views, 5,000 views, 500,000 views, 5 million views. Like, we've all had those moments, but we all started from zero. And one day when we just clicked post and something popped off, like that is the moment where you're like, aha, I got it. That's the thing that resonates with this audience. Now let me replicate. Let me like keep building and let me just test new things. And there has to be both. You can't go in and say, I'm only going to create this kind of content, and if it flops, then I'm quitting. Or if this flops, then I'm going to just keep posting and keep posting and keep posting. And you know what? Maybe one day one of those videos will go off, but I think you'll have far more success if you just test different formats, test trending audios, test a variety of different content before you really pick a niche. And obviously we're talking about people starting from ground zero. We're not talking about people who've been building already. To answer your second question about grappling with like, how do you create and sell to an audience versus how do you create creatively? They have to be intertwined. I think there's a certain amount of personal narrative and storytelling that has to go into content, at least for creators. I'm speaking from my own experience. But most creators that are successful have a story, and they're able to, for example, promote a Stanley Cup in a number of ways. Some creators are going to say, you know, I love Stanley. I'm just the biggest Stanley fan. I'm so happy that Stanley wants to work with me, right? Okay, regular video. They're probably, their audience is used to being sold.
Right.
Versus a creator, let's say myself, for example, I might be like, this is what my desk looks like when I work at home. and the Stanley is organically placed on my desk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have to keep myself hydrated because I literally stand at a standing desk for 10 hours a day. And I'm filming videos and I'm editing and I'm emailing and I'm on podcasts and I'm doing whatever I'm doing in my creator business. And Stanley keeps me hydrated throughout the day. That is the difference.
Yeah. It's still authentic.
Yeah.
And one of our first guests, Alan, we talked about creating and like highlighting conflict, and not creating it, but highlighting, because a lot of times there is conflict in even the short story that other people relate to. Like, we all have to stay hydrated. And you can forget to do it when you're working.
100%.
And that's such a more authentic way to connect to people. And the solution happens to be a Stanley Cup. And
I'll mention that neither is right or wrong. There is a time and a place for affiliate content creators that all they do on their account is post stuff and link stuff for people to buy. I've seen it time and time again. And I have even had the intrusive thoughts myself of like, holy shit, this girl built this like, hundreds of thousands of followers who literally just like buy from her Amazon storefront or her like to know it. Holy shit, this is amazing.
Because people are used to like, they go to TikTok to find things to buy.
Right. But that content would never, ever resonate with my audience. So even if I were to try to do that, I would have to start over from ground zero.
Yeah.
And the reason is, again, I've built my audience based on a almost like parasocial relationship basis versus like an influencer and an audience basis, if that makes sense. Like people,
well, let's talk about your audience and like what your message is today, because you've done a lot, from photography to content creation to you've written a book. Like, who are you targeting and what are you trying to share with them?
So it's definitely evolved over the years. For anyone that doesn't know, as I mentioned, I was diagnosed with a chronic health issue when I was very young. And as I grew up, my symptoms got worse and worse. COVID happened. I was a 2020 graduated at home, which was quite an experience. So shout out to anybody who's listening, who's a part of the COVID graduate season of life. And I remember sitting down with my mom. She's like, we're going to figure this out. We're going to, hit up these new doctors at Columbia, NYP, NYU. We're going to get to the bottom of this. And I basically went through a bunch of testing for around 2 years with different doctors. And as I was doing that in college, there were professors and friends and people around me that didn't believe that I was sick because I look normal. And this is an experience that so many people deal with, especially women and young women, especially also with women that are misdiagnosed or undiagnosed for years and years and years with health issues. And so I was sharing about that, like predominantly from maybe 2018 to like 2022. By then, I was starting to get asked to be on panels, and I was in Sports Illustrated because of it and the health advocacy. And then I got invited to the White House. And all of a sudden, there's this shift of, yes, we care so much about your health advocacy content and we love you for that. And how the fuck are you at the White House 3 times within a year? Like, what is going on? How are you doing this? What are you doing? And all I was doing was sharing my story, which is why I'm so adamant about authenticity. And I'm using quotes because I think authentic's like the most overused word in the creator world, because what we're really asking for is one's ability to be transparent and to storytell. That's all we're asking for. And so at that point, I started building my company, Hosts of Influence, to help creators learn how to storytell better and then build businesses out of that.
So your wedge was sharing, like being vulnerable and sharing your personal story around a life with chronic health issues. And then in parallel, you kind of learned, well, I'm good at being a creator and like making money off of this and turning this into a career. I want to help other people do the same.
And also, I will mention, in college, I did a bunch of those brand ambassador programs. So I was like doing field marketing, hosting tailgates, hosting bar
your
crawls.
LinkedIn is like, the amount of experiences you have on your LinkedIn is almost endless.
I know.
Which is good though. That's how you like
LinkedIn.
You have to cast a wide net and like figure out what you enjoy.
And to be honest with you, those experiences also positioned me to have the brand experience to then leverage it, even though I had a micro audience back, 2019, 2020, 2021, I was still under like 10K on Instagram, to be able to go to brands and be like, oh, okay, I actually have this huge audience of college students as well as like Gen Zers and people interested in health. So like, how about we partner on something, even if it's a skincare brand, we're talking about self-care, dealing with chronic health issues. So it was never, oh, I love this face mask, la, la, la. It's, it's the fact that I deal with chronic health issues. And after a really brutal day of like chronic pain and fatigue, a face mask is like amazing. And sometimes I don't even have the energy to do a face mask, but this face mask, I love this one. So that was kind of like how the brand work started, and also like doing partnerships with big brands like Spotify and Meta and Google. Like at that point, people were like, that is like where I want to go. Like it doesn't get much better than partnering with like the platforms themselves and being invited to be a verified creator in every single community on all of these platforms, from Discord, Pinterest, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, like literally like all of these things, LinkedIn. And I'm like, oh my God, like I guess I'm a creator now. And I literally manage like 15 different socials.
I actually wanted to ask you this. When do you think you sat back and like thought to yourself and like identified yourself as a creator? Like, I am a creator. When did you feel that?
So I think in 2020, at that point, I already had around like 100 and something thousand followers on TikTok. So pretty early on, like 2019,
and
2020.
When did you start? You've started photography forever ago, but when did you start making videos? And how long until you got to 100,000?
2018.
Okay, so like 2 years.
But also I will mention, I was creating video ads that were like whitelisted ads for brands for
like UGC
Facebook.
Ads?
Yeah, for Facebook, like from 2016 to like 2020 when it was in person.
And how, I love that you brought that up, because I think I always like to talk with our guests about monetization.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has this dream of monetizing through brand deals, which is basically selling attention you've created within your audience. But I've learned as a photographer, there's ways you can make money earlier, which is by selling your services.
Yeah.
And being good at, like, it's hard to show personality and be energetic in front of a camera. And some people are better at it than others. And before you have a big audience, you can do this thing called UGC ads. So tell me about that, because I think there's a lot of people out there that don't realize they probably have the skills to go and make money making UGC ads.
I actually did a lot of UGC, and I also interned for this company, Movers and Shakers, during COVID, which is a huge TikTok marketing agency. If you're not aware of it, you should check them out. They're so cool. And I was doing a lot of UGC for some of their clients back in 2020. And I just remember being like, oh, like the only reason I'm good at this is because I can set up lights and a set and build like some weird rig to make a lipstick turn, because I'm drilling like a hole into the bottom of a lipstick to make it turn on like a fidget spinner or something. Like literally I was doing, or like hot gluing it. Like I was doing the craziest things.
Have you seen that Instagram page, Shitty Rigs?
I don't know.
It's literally just videos of people doing
such
like
a great account.
Goofy rigs like that.
Yeah. Or like Grace Wells. Do you know her? Oh my God. Amazing creator.
Yeah. Some of the behind the scenes of like these creative shots you see. Like I did one the other night, sharpening a knife. I was cooking, and I just had a little like Go pod from the Instago like in one of my fingers, just like going like this.
So
and
fun.
It looks, you not realize how simple it is to create that. You just got to think a little different about camera angles and lighting.
Right. Which is where I think the intersection of like traditional photography, videography, and media intersects with content.
Yeah.
And those creators that have that ability to just like shoot something or make something look good are always gonna do better than the people that don't. And I used to only shoot on DSLR, and that was a selling point, like an upsell to brands from 2018 to like 2022. And by 2022, everyone's like social first, iPhone only. We don't want highly curated. But now I'm seeing a shift again where people are going the opposite. Now they're going back and they're like, we love DSLR. We love how it looks like a commercial. So I think everything's just gonna ebb and flow.
There's like cycles,
Yeah, you just have to learn. Like the lighting doesn't change. The shots don't change. Just the quality of the camera changes. So as long as you are learning the skills, and by the way, if people are going to be like, oh, well, it's so hard to learn, like literally spend an hour on YouTube. Like, oh my God,
Who do you think, well, let me rephrase this. We got Colin laughing back there. I think that photographers, and I'm biased because I am a photographer,
I'm
but
probably
honestly,
biased too.
I identify more as a creator now than a photographer.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is cool. Like I'm really liking making videos, and I've learned I think I've done the hard part. I've been a photographer for 10 years. I know composition.
It is the hard
I know
part.
lighting. I'm like, why don't I just start making some like short videos?
Well,
I
the
have
difference
the skills.
is you and I could walk into this room right now and face that light and take a selfie and we'd know it would look good versus somebody else might turn this way and try to take it this way. Yep. And it's not going to look good. Yeah. The same thing applies to natural light outside, like naturals versus direct light versus any of that. Like I literally have made decks to train people on like where they should be in the middle of the screen on their phone, where like what kind of light is best. Like direct sunlight's going to look crazy, but sometimes it works. I've made really viral videos with direct light. And I think sometimes because things look a little bit extreme, it pops. But I'm not going to recommend that all the time. I'm mostly going to recommend the indirect light.
And like the story you're trying to tell in that moment.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about monetization a bit more because we talked about UGC for a moment. It's a good way to get started. But like, how are you making money today?
It's almost all through brand deals. I would say 90% brand deals. And for the UGC stuff, I was doing it back then, but it was also like I wasn't posting it, but I was still getting paid and I was still micro enough for me to be like, oh, $500. Like, yay, it's so great. Which like it is, no shade.
That's like a decent side hustle.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Instead of like waiting for things to happen, like spend your evenings after your 9 to 5 starting to make UGC ads and make $100, make $500.
Yeah, and
like,
then it adds up and you just put in the reps.
When you get better.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden
then you upsell.
When I think it's a good way to like get paid to learn.
Right.
And then you're like, oh wait, I'm getting really good at this. I should just start building my own page.
Right.
And building my audience. And that's where you can start to do your own brand deals.
And or teach people how. So you're essentially like productizing the business that you've done, but you're teaching people how to do what you've done, which is literally like, I'm not going to say making a course is easy, but if you're good at something and if you've built a following on your UGC page, which I've seen creators do time and time again, they'll slowly start to do webinars or lives or collaborate with other UGC creators and then develop a course or like a one-sheeter on how to reach out to brands and pitch yourself for UGC. So the same applies for brand deals. The same applies for public speaking. The same applies for writing a book. This is what I'm saying and what I've said since the beginning. Build a roadmap. Figure out how to get there. A plus B equals C. Like it doesn't have to be rocket science. You don't also, and this is a hard truth, any piece of content that you've made is usually going to be unoriginal. Like somebody has almost always had the same thought or idea or invention.
Well, that's how art works. Like
art and business.
Yeah. If you look at, I mean, even music, so many like new songs.
Yeah,
there's probably a song from like years ago that has a similar instrumental or like art is, I mean, we inspire each other. And like, I think it's okay to take inspiration from someone you look up to and want to like, you think you resonate with, like use that as a starting point and you kind of
steal
find
like an artist.
Steal, exactly.
But you asked me about how I make money. So brand deals.
Yeah.
Also public speaking, which again, I've set that up. So as I mentioned in my story before, I've talked a lot about my health issues. So I've done a number of things with that. I've talked with on stages and done presentations about brand building. So the reason why I think I've survived all these years is because I've branded myself as a health advocate, as a creator, expert and teacher. Also just like as a creatorpreneur, I love that word because my platform is what allows me to do what I do now, which is speak at events and on stages about personal branding to help people learn how to storytell better so that they can then build their business. I also do a lot of public speaking in the health advocacy, patient advocacy world. So I don't know when this is airing, but I'm speaking, I'm doing the closing keynote for the Endometriosis Foundation of America because I myself deal with endo and I'm really excited to do that keynote. And what I'll be talking about there is like living life with resilience and figuring out how to overcome like a really shitty circumstance and use it as leverage, whether that's in your personal life or your business life, to like propel you to success. So that's what I do in terms of getting paid to do. And then I'm also writing a book right now, another book.
Okay, tell us 2 things related to storytelling. Tell us about the book, and then I want to talk about storytelling tips.
Yeah.
Book first. Let's talk about that.
So the book is going to be all about resilience and patient advocacy, patient leadership, understanding how to navigate relationships, whether that's friends, family, work, doctors, relationship with yourself. And I'm excited to share more once it's out. But
and you said it's a children's book, right?
So that's the one behind me.
Oh,
I already wrote that book. That book's been published for 2 years. That's a children's book. And it basically covers my story about resilience and whatnot, but for kids. So I'm writing the adult nonfiction long form book, and I'm very excited for it to come out. So I'm not sure when it's going to come out. Later this year or in the next 2 years. I'm not sure yet.
And on the topic of storytelling, like you just explained that you teach people how to tell better stories. What is 1 or 2 tips you have for creators out there that are looking to tell stronger stories when they're creating short form content?
So something I learned a long time ago, but was recently reminded of, I attended Tony Robbins' UPW. And if anybody does or doesn't know, it's a huge motivational conference, seminar kind of thing. And if you don't know, just look it up. It's going to be easier for you to look it up and watch a video than me understand. You never heard of it? Wow.
I mean, I've not heard of that specific.
But you know Tony Robbins.
Yeah, of course,
okay.
Of course.
So at some point in his, programming, he does this exercise where he asks you what your why is. And it's easy to say, my why is, helping content creators learn how to tell their stories better. Well, why? Oh, because I want to help creators or content creators or individuals learn how to build a business so that they don't have to rely on a corporate job or they don't have to rely on anyone but themselves. Why is that important? Oh, because I feel like in my experience of being in corporate, I was not granted the flexibility that I needed to manage my chronic health issues. Why is that important? Because I was not able to perform basic job duties and my job description because my chronic health issues held me back and made my quality of life shitty. And so why is talking about that important to me? Because I don't think anybody should have to go through that. So on and so forth. So you can do this any number of times. I think he recommends doing it 7 times. I think I only got 4 deep there. So you can just see how it goes from my purpose of now helping people tell their stories leads back to the struggle that I've had. Yeah. And using that and inspiring people with that is leading me back to that final point again of helping people now do the same thing.
So if I wanted to create, I'm trying to think more tactically about this. If I'm making a piece of short form content. And I want to tell a story of a day in the life. I think it's a great example. A lot of people are doing day in the life content right now. It's, I think, a good way to get started. Yeah. You're challenging them to dig deep into why am I making a video about my day?
And or why do I care?
Why do you personally care, or why does the viewers care?
Both. Why should I be investing a minute of my time into your day in the life as a content creator? Why do I care about that? And if you don't have a reason other than, well, I just like making it for fun, and that's fine. If it is your why could literally be I got laid off from my job, so I started making content for fun, and I actually found it really fun and engaging to talk about my experiences online, and people are really curious about why I do what I do, or maybe you become passionate about the industry you were in or whatever it is. There always can be a why, but if you approach the video content with the angle of I am just creating a day in the life, people are going to scroll. It's not going to be interesting because you're just showing them, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And why should I care?
Yeah, you have to challenge yourself to find the meaning behind it.
And I'm also not saying that everyone has to dig deep and share their deepest, darkest vulnerability or something super traumatic. I'm not here to promote people trauma dumping. All I'm asking for is what about you makes your content so special? And why should I buy from you? Why should I listen to you? Why am I even watching your content right now?
Well, I think being vulnerable is like a way to connect with people.
Yeah.
There's so many viewers like may not say what you're saying, but they're probably thinking it, or they're probably having a similar experience. And unless you share that with them, you're not going to stand out outside of the other day in the life creators.
And I've also seen time and time again where creators will either submit a script to a brand or create an ad for a brand, and it is unhinged in a way that you're like, wait, what is happening in this video? And sometimes, of course, like there's the shock factor, and like people are doing things in their videos now to kind of like hack the algorithm and get your attention, because we have such a low attention span now. But in my, opinion of being, I guess, like a career creator, somebody who still has just under 500K across my platforms, I'm not banking on my large audience. Like I'm banking on my ability to tell my story and connect with people. So when I launched the other day that I was doing this final keynote at the endo patient day, everyone was like, oh my God, this is so inspiring to me. Like you're inspiring me to share my story. And all I did was announce how passionate I am about patient advocacy, because nobody should have to go undiagnosed for 13 years and suffer like with chronic pain and everything I dealt with for 13 years. And unfortunately, that's an experience that so many women deal with endometriosis and a lot of other conditions. And just posting that announcement inspired somebody.
I wanted to ask you if you could share a specific like success story or like impact you've had on someone by sharing your story about chronic health issues.
Like I'll tell my Sports Illustrated story, which is literally the craziest whirlwind of my life, but they have usually an open casting call every year for their Sports Illustrated swim search. And I was like, okay, cool. I saw it, like it popped up on my feed one day and I'm like,
why not?
Yeah, why not? Like worst case, I make a cool video. Like best case, I get chosen and I got to go on a photo shoot and be in the magazine. And so I ended up making this video talking about how I wanted to represent women dealing with chronic health issues. And like, I'm a content creator. I understand lighting and posing, but more importantly, I understand how to connect with different kinds of people. I think it's like 75% of people deal with a chronic illness, not just women, but in the United States, 75% of people, that's 3 out of 4 people. That means 1/4 of our population in the United States is healthy and 75% is not. And if you yourself don't have a chronic health issue, someone you know does. I can almost guarantee it if you really think about it. All that to say, I post this video on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, I tagged MJ, the editor-in-chief of Sports Illustrated, in my post. She sees it immediately. I see that she's viewed my profile, and I'm like, holy shit, she has eyeballs on my page. I think the next week I had my interview. The next week I got the call, and 2 weeks later I was in the Dominican Republic shooting for Sports Illustrated. So it just goes to show that like, that was very vulnerable. And I will admit, like maybe that year, like I don't know what, they use to qualify people. I'm no expert here in that world. And a lot of people have asked me, Gigi, like, how do I get into Sports Illustrated? Like, I'm not here to teach you how to do that. What I'm here to teach you how to do is storytell and be ballsy enough to ask for something that you want and or navigate in uncharted water, right? Like I supposedly was like the first woman with a chronic illness to pose in the magazine, which is like crazy to me. And maybe that's, true or false. I don't know. But I saw a narrow pathway for me to kind of like forage, and I jumped off the deep end and just full send. So I'd encourage people to do that.
So many people that have seen that and can relate. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I think to highlight a couple of things that have come up multiple times, it sounds like be yourself, like dig layers deep into why you're doing what you're doing, and just put yourself out there. Like reach out to that agency, that brand, or to Sports Illustrated and explain why you're the right fit. And only good things are going to come from it. So
yeah. And do it strategically, do your research, do your due diligence. Like, it bothers me so much when I get a message from somebody who asks me for time on my calendar about something that they can easily have listened to a podcast episode about or looked at my resources or my content about. And I get it, but this goes back to my initial point to which we started with, which is people are lazy. And so as the creator, you either have to create a sales funnel and or a program that like makes sense for lazy people and leads them to either give them your email or, buy your product, join your course, and or like just it's not worth your time and energy to put a lot of effort into somebody who's being lazy. Like, do I even want that customer?
Yeah.
Probably not.
You probably don't. Well, Gigi, thank you so much for coming on. This is awesome.
Yeah.
We'll keep an eye out for the book launch,
Yes.
the second book launch coming soon.
Second book launch coming soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.